Happy Monday, everyone. It is our next Bright Spot session with Taryn, and I just want to welcome you to your next fantastic week. Hopefully, everybody who was celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday had a wonderful holiday and a restful, rejuvenating weekend. I hope that's the case across the board. And as you all know, because this is now our third or our fourth session, I am on a mission to help make Monday a bright spot in your week. And so we're going to move into the next session of helpful tips, which actually comes from a poll that we recently did in the group. You might remember that from a few weeks ago, I asked if we could wave a magic wand and solve your biggest challenge with work-life balance, what would we do? And the answer that got the most votes on it is that we would actually give you additional hands to help you get more work done. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is a couple of ways to get you those additional hands today. So this is a challenge that we see particularly in corporate environments. What I've come across a lot, right, is that we all might realize that we do need additional help, or there might be circumstances where if we could just get one more person on our team or one more person reporting to us, everything would be smooth sailing. But of course, when you're in a corporate environment, oftentimes you have less control over the budget. There might be external factors that you can't control, such as overlapping projects or project extensions that create more work for you. So this is kind of mostly going to talk about some scenarios that you can consider in a situation like that, where you don't have any control over the budget and you don't have any way to kind of think about the dollar side of things. And so before I dive into that, there is just one piece that I really want to hit on, because I can give you all of the strategies in the world to add additional hands and get additional help, but you have to take that first step in actually asking for help. And so the reason I want to highlight that is because I imagine, as I say that, for some people that might cause you to bristle right away, because as overachievers, one thing that we particularly can struggle with sometimes is asking for help. And that actually comes in several different forms. So one is that there's oftentimes this thought process as an overachiever that if you ask for help, that you are potentially devaluing the work that you do, or the role that you have, or how good you are at your role. And so that can be a particular fear that overachievers have. And then the other piece that can come up is, depending on the role that you have, if you have a really specialized role, we can oftentimes tell ourselves these stories that nobody else can do that, or there's not any way to bring in additional help, because though anybody else that you bring in isn't going to have the knowledge that you have or the skill sets that you have. And so I just want to highlight both of those, because they're just not true, right? Like, so they're stories that our brain tells ourselves. And I just want to highlight them because they're probably one of the biggest blockers. Even if I tell you something today that really makes a lot of sense, or that could genuinely help you, that could be a blocker that keeps you from actually taking action. And so I want to highlight it in case that thought is coming up for you now. We can just stop and pause this video and address it. Let's just wipe that out. And the two things that I'm going to challenge you to think through, if you are having those thoughts at all, is first, how much more could you achieve if you actually had additional hands helping you? So that one's going to hopefully be very helpful if you are questioning the value of the work that you do, or how much value you bring to an organization. Asking for help doesn't diminish that value. It actually increases the value that you're bringing. And so that's the first thought I'm going to challenge you with. The second thought is, none of us are superhuman, right? And so oftentimes when we have this thought that we shouldn't ask for help because it's based in this idea that we should be able to do it all. And so I'm going to ask you at this point, is it more important to keep up that facade, essentially, that you are doing it all, or that you should be able to do it all, Or is it more important to get work-life balance? Is it more important to get a handle on the hours that you're working or the work stress that you are experiencing? So those are just two questions that I'm going to put out there for you to consider. Again, you can pause this, you can write those down, you can journal, but if you are somebody who is struggling with that, I would just really encourage spending a lot of time thinking through that. So all of that being said, now we're going to jump into our 5 creative ways to get extra hands to help you get more done. So the first method that you can try is actually looking at other people within your team or your department to help you with specific aspects of your work. So a really easy example of that could be admin tasks. So pretty much every job out there has some level of administrative tasks. And the nice thing about those is that for the most part, pretty much anybody can do those administrative tasks. And so if you find yourself really buried with work or you've got a lot of heavy projects going on, administrative tasks can be something that can be very easy to delegate outside of yourself, even if you're talking about delegating to people who are not reporting directly to you or not within your specific function within your department. And so that's an easy example. Another really great example is to look at somebody in your department who has specialized skills that can help you complete an aspect of your work faster. So a really easy example there is when you're talking about spreadsheet work. So a lot of our roles will have some kind of requirement to do an analysis of some kind of reporting or an analysis of a situation. Maybe that requires using spreadsheets, writing formulas, things like that. And if spreadsheet work is not your jam, then you most likely will spend a lot of time spinning your wheels, looking up things, trying to figure out how to fill in that information, how to fill in the formulas, how to analyze, etc. But if there's somebody on your team who really loves that work, then that can be a really easy way to ask for help just for that particular piece of whatever it is that you're working on. So the one thing I'll challenge you with that is, again, if you're in a specialized role, it can be very easy for the thought to come up that you cannot hand off to somebody else because they don't have enough knowledge or they don't know enough about what's going on to really be able to help you. And so if you are that person or you're in that situation, then one question that I would just challenge you back with is, what would enable somebody to help you? And so use that question to kind of think through, okay, if I have to ask for help and they don't have the information that's necessary, then what would I need to do to get them that information? Or could I spend 10 minutes explaining this to them in enough for them to be able to help? Because that's the key, right? You're not trying to take somebody on your team and make them an expert in what you do. You're just trying to give them enough information to genuinely be able to help you. So that's the first creative way to get additional hands. The second way is to consider bringing in an intern. So this could be somebody who is a paid intern, it could be an unpaid intern. And when you think about interns, there's a few different ways that can happen. So interns can be spread throughout the year. So I've seen interns that will work for companies for a full year, but with reduced hours, or part-time hours. I've also seen interns that will work for just a few months, especially during the summer hours. And that could be full-time or part-time. So there's a few different ways to do that. And then the second creative way to get additional hands is to actually look outside your team, your department, or potentially even your company to help bring in somebody who might see helping you as a really great learning opportunity. And so if you go back to that first example, right, I mentioned asking for other people within your team or department. Those people will already have some basic idea of what you do, but you could have somebody in a completely different department within your company who's always been curious about the work that you do or has always been curious about your department and maybe is considering a career change or something along those lines. And so those people are really great people to ask for help because by helping you, they're getting additional information, and there's kind of a win on their side as well. And so that's actually one place that I want to pause with all three of the options that I just talked about. You really want to focus on giving as much as you take. And so one of the best ways that you can do that is by sharing your knowledge and really helping people understand what they're helping with and why you need help from them, let's say it that way. Because knowledge is power. All of us are hungry for knowledge. Everybody wants to learn more. We want to expand our skill sets, especially when we're talking about a working environment. And so try not to think about just asking for help and just shoving it to somebody else and then moving on. If you can take a second to help educate somebody when you're asking for help, it's going to make them feel valuable. It's going to make them want to help you more. And it's going to ultimately create a win-win for both of you. Even if you are talking about something that's an admin task, right? So I've done this before many times where I've actually handed off admin tasks to somebody else who has no idea why they're, what this has to do with why they have to send these letters. And so even just being able to explain that situation is really valuable for them. The other disclaimer that I'm going to say with all three of the options I just talked about is that if you are considering any of these, you want to make sure that you're checking in with your leader to make sure they're in alignment with it. You want to talk to potentially your HR team because there can be some employment compliance components here that you just want to make sure that, all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed if you're going to look at these. And then obviously, if you are thinking about pulling in help from either somebody else within your team or somebody else within the company, it's always a good courtesy to make sure that you're checking in with their direct leader as well. So all three of these are things that I've deployed myself with a lot of success. And usually I will actually start with the leader first so that I'm giving them that courtesy opportunity to say that the other person either has too much of their own work or whatever the case may be. So just keep those two things in mind. Now, the fourth thing that you can consider, and I suppose to a degree, this should be really factored into the HR check-in that I talked about a moment ago, and probably even your leader check-in, but you can consider bringing in part-time help in the form of a contractor, a temporary worker, or a virtual assistant, which might apply a little bit more to your, if you have a side gig that you're doing or you have an entrepreneurship outside of your corporate gig, that virtual assistant might be more helpful there. But when we think about contractors or temporary workers, they're really, really great if you have very specialized project work or you have project work that's occurring for just a short period of time. Because those are going to bring you additional hands, but just for a focused period where you don't have to necessarily continue employment. And so that's a great opportunity to think about. And again, like I said, probably want to check in with your leader and your HR on that one too. I should have just looped that in. But the last example, the fifth example of a way that you can get extra hands to help you is actually maybe a different angle than you might have thought of before. It's going to be focused on your personal life. So far, everything that I've talked about has been examples that you can deploy in your work life. But obviously in our personal lives, we all have things that we might consider to be a different kind of work or a different kind of obligation, like yard work or cleaning the house or cleaning out that closet that you've been trying to clean out for forever, right? So all of those are things that still, even though they're in our personal life, they still might prevent us from getting the relaxation that we're looking for or the me time or the time with friends and family. So if you are in a situation in your work life where none of the four other techniques that I mentioned really can truly be deployed for one reason or another, and you really need to create time and space for yourself or for your loved ones, then this other avenue of looking for ways to get extra hands in your personal life can be a really great way to do that. And so I already mentioned like yard work and cleaning, things like that. A lot of times the first thing we think about with that is hiring a professional. It's obviously a really great way to get that work done and a very easy way to get the work done. But another option could be talking to children in the neighborhood. Maybe there are some teenagers who are looking to earn some extra dollars for the summer, things like that. If you have a neighborhood website or a neighborhood community chat, that can be a great way to ask about those types of things. And so that concludes the 5 creative ways to get additional hands. I will just mention them really quick in summary. So we talked about looking to others within your team or department to get help that way, looking for interns to bring in because they're actually looking for these specific skill sets and the specific type of help that you're seeking, most likely. We also talked about looking outside of your team, your department, or your company to bring in people who might be seeking additional learning opportunities for their own career growth. We talked about bringing in part-time help in the form of a contractor, a temp, or a virtual assistant. And then finally, the 5th one was looking in your personal life to bring in help through for things like yard work, cleaning, project work around the house, that type of thing. So I mentioned this briefly before, but I have personally applied all 5 of these things with success. So I mentioned that because I imagine for some people, if this is the first time you've ever heard some of these options, you might be kind of questioning it. You could potentially be wondering if that's something that can really easily be done. And I assure you it absolutely can. Like I said, done it before. It's been an amazing way to get additional help in. And then what I'm really curious, and I'd love to just hear from you in the comments on these, is if one of these ideas in particular jumps out to you as being something that you've never considered or something that you think could be potentially helpful, I'd love to hear that in the comments. The other thing that you could drop into the comments is if you have any questions about any of these options. So I imagine for some people, a few of these, if you've never considered them, you might have questions about how to get started with them or where to get started. And so if you have questions, I would be happy to answer those. Just drop that in the comments as well. And then the last thing that I'll say is just kind of circling back to what I mentioned before. In order to really deploy any of these, obviously you do have to take action outside of yourself to ask for help. And as you can, if you think through some of these, right, it could be asking for help through a number of different channels, right? Talking to your HR team, talking to your leader, talking to other leaders. And so again, just calling out that can be very uncomfortable for some people. There could be a lot of resistance to that. If that is you, if you're hearing these and you're like, hey, these really sound great, but I'm not ready to ask for help, there's probably some more for us to talk through with that. And that's okay. That's a very, very normal feeling to have and a very normal thought to have, especially as an overachiever. But it is something that we probably want to talk about in greater detail to really help you get the help that you need and eventually be able to start getting the work-life balance that you're looking for. So one other thing I will drop into this post is a link to my calendar. If that's you and you're really struggling with this or really resistant to it because you don't know how you feel about it or you don't know how to ask for help, just schedule some time with me. I would love to talk through it and talk through how I can help you with that. But otherwise, that is the end of our Bright Spot session for today, November 28th. And I hope that you found this helpful, and I hope that all of you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much. Bye.